Good day. Good day. Thank you for joining us. So we'll give it just another moment or two, and then we'll go ahead and get started. As you know, folks, this is a very brief touch on a very complex topic. So my hope, there is a 3-hour version of this learning community conversation on de-escalation, but my hope is that there will be benefit in sort of touching the highlights of this particular topic. And I do, time permitting, have a scenario that I'd like us all to be able to look at together as well. So again, if you've just joined us and you haven't had a chance to do so yet, please do type your full first and last name in the chat and where you're from. If you happen to be sharing your computer with another person, as opposed to Caitlin, who is sharing her computer with her beautiful cat, who I can see over her shoulder. It's great. Please type their full name and where they're from. Oh, and Kira has her cat too. This is Bring Your Cat to the De-escalation training day. So if you're sharing your computer with anybody, please do type their full names and where they're from in the chat as well. Want to make sure that everybody who's here, Shamika, that's okay. Thank you for letting me know. Want to make sure that everybody that's here receives credit for their participation and their presence for this 1 hour, very brief conversation. We'll give it one more moment. There are 120 of us. Again, let me say, wow. That's great. I'm so glad so many people are interested in this topic. And I will also say a very, very, very warm welcome back to the people whom I've had the opportunity to be with just recently in a motivational interviewing course. And of course, a very warm welcome back to other folks whom I've had the opportunity to be in other learning community conversations with, and a very warm welcome to anyone who's joining the learning community for the first time. Okay, and I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right. Uriel, that's correct? Yeah. Yeah, and Uriel, just make sure that you also have typed your colleague's full first and last name. Thank you. Just want to make sure everybody gets credit. Thank you so much. Okay. Great. We'll give it one more moment, folks. There are 127 of us. We'll take care of a couple of logistical details, and then we'll go ahead and go forward. I will say this, if you've already typed your first and last name and where you're from in the chat, I'm going to ask you to ponder a particular question. And we'll have a little bit of time to talk about this, but I'm going to pose this question, and I just want you to be thinking about it while we are going over the brief logistical details and guidelines. And that question is this: what is the relationship between wellness and self-care and the process of de-escalation? What is the relationship between wellness and self-care and the process of de-escalation? So I'm just asking you to ponder that while I go over a couple of logistical details, okay? So just be thinking about that, and when we get to that point in the conversation, I'll invite anybody who's willing or open to share their thoughts or their ideas about the relationship between those two things, okay? So we are going to go ahead and officially get started. At this moment, there are 133 of us. Again, I say wow on a Friday. Fantastic. My name is Paul, and I feel very fortunate to have the opportunity to be here with all of you today to focus on this very relevant and particularly important topic of de-escalation. I am a social worker by training. Presently, I am a research project director at the New York State Psychiatric Institute, also a senior staff trainer and curriculum writer for the Northeast and Caribbean Addiction Technology Transfer Center, and very fortunate to be a graduate of Hunter College School of Social Work with an emphasis particularly on group development and group facilitation. I began my social service career in 1991. And usually there are one or two people in the learning community who send me a message and say, I wasn't even born then. That's great. I'm happy for you. But that's when I started my social work career. And I was providing direct care and services to people living with HIV and AIDS. And I did that for a little over 12 years until 2003, and then made the transition specifically into workforce development training and technical assistance. Again, very, very happy to be here with each and every one of you. There are now 138 of us in the learning community. I am going to share my screen, and what I'm going to ask a couple of you to do, if you're willing, is once I share my screen, if you can actually see the title slide, just unmute and say, yeah, I can see it. And for everybody else, if you wouldn't mind just typing the letter Y in it, don't do it yet. But when I'm showing my screen, type the letter Y in the chat if you can actually see it. Okay, just want to make sure you can see it. So now I'm going to share. And again, if a couple of you could unmute, and then if a couple of you could also, if the rest of you would also put a Y in the chat. So you should be seeing it. I've got my fingers crossed. You should be seeing it now.
Yes, we can see it.
Yes.
We can see it.
Great. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And let's see if I'm getting some Y's in the chat as well. Yes. Okay, good. Very good. Now, again, this is an abbreviated version of a longer learning community conversation on this topic. I did want to develop a shorter version of this because sometimes people don't have the opportunity or the availability to be online for 3 hours. And I thought, there are parts of this that could be very relevant and useful if laid out in a briefer format. So that's the intention behind this hour-long conversation. You'll notice that the title says De-escalation Basic Tools for Social Workers. You'll notice intentionally that for social workers is in smaller typeface. I did that because when we developed this training, it was originally for a group of social workers. And we found as we started to deliver it, more and more folks who were not quote unquote technically social workers were very interested in this topic and had a lot to offer to the conversation. So you do not need to be a social worker to engage in the practice or process of de-escalation, as I know many of you know. So having said that, let me underline that we are a learning community, and my hope is that we will choose to use language that is welcoming, respectful, and inclusive of all 145 people that are in this learning community conversation this morning. If it happens to be morning where you are, it's still morning where I am. Because we are a learning community of 146 strong, what I talk about, what you talk about, what gets put on the table may not necessarily reflect the official positions of our funders. And that's perfectly okay, because our funders want these learning community conversations to actually be supportive, relevant, and useful to you so that you can more effectively work with the folks that you have the opportunity to work with. Welcome back. If you have not yet done so, this is the last time I'll say it. If you have not yet done so, please type your full first and last name and where you're from in the chat. That's the way we have the timestamp to know that you were here and that you qualify for the 1 hour of credentialing credit. There will be a brief evaluation. I'm going to do my best. This is only an hour, now a little less than an hour. This is only an hour long, but I will do my best to leave time at the end for you to complete that evaluation and then in a timely way go on to your next appointment. If you're able to, if it's possible, please be on camera. If you're not able to be on camera, and a couple of people have already let me know, That's okay. I'm just glad you're here. If you're not able to be on camera for whatever reason, it could be it doesn't work for your particular learning style, or you're in a setting where it's not right or appropriate for you to be on camera right now, just send me a direct message and let me know that. You don't need to tell everybody in the learning community, but just let me know that so I know that you're here and that you'll participate in the way that you can. As I mentioned just quickly a moment ago, if you wouldn't mind remaining muted until you have something you want to say, react to, question, or share information. While I'm talking, do not hesitate to unmute. You can interrupt me with a reaction, a thought, additional information at any time you like. What I would ask, though, is if Wanda has the floor and she's making a point, that no one interrupt her. Let her make that point and we'll give her the respect of listening. And of course, that applies to everybody except me. You are more than welcome to interrupt me. So we will offer each other the respect of listening and letting our colleagues in the learning community make their points. The final guideline that I'm going to ask everybody to consider and abide by, if you're able to, is speaking from the I. I believe this, I know this, I have this information. Now I'm going to advance the slide to our goals, but I'm going to take the slides down for a minute because I just want to ask, can everybody agree to those guidelines for our learning community? And you can wave, you can give a thumbs up electronically, you can count out money directly from my savings account, whatever works best for me. I mean you. Whatever works best for you. Excellent. And if I'm not able to see you, please do give either a thumbs up or type yes in the chat. Fantastic. I appreciate it. So those are our guidelines. And Noelle, do you want to comment or are you just agreeing to the guidelines or would you like to make a deposit? She's like, no deposit.
I'm just agreeing. Sorry.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Noelle. Thank you so much. Glad you're here. All right. So those are our guidelines. I'm going to go back to our screen for a moment. There are predominantly two overarching goals for this learning community conversation, even though it's only an hour, and even for the 3-hour version. And I will tell you, just on a side note, I recently had the great opportunity to be invited to South Carolina to a group of social workers who were working in libraries. And I don't know if there are any library social workers here today, but I had the opportunity to participate in a conference with them and also share this training with them. And believe it or not, de-escalation has become a very important set of skills to have when working in a library. Goal number one is to sort of have us all get on the same page, or at least consider the fact that when participants, consumers, clients, patients come in to receive services or maybe receive services remotely through Zoom or some other digital platform, that it's possible for a variety of reasons that when they come in to seek those services, they may be in a state of what, for the purposes of our conversation, I will call heightened affect, or meaning that they're having some sort of feelings about it. Could be a variety of reasons. So I'm just putting that on the table as something for us to consider, because when somebody's in that state or in a state of heightened affect, there's a stronger possibility that they either could already be escalated or they could escalate easily because they're maybe flooded with a variety of feelings that they might be having. And then ultimately the other goal is to adopt and think about and refine, if you're doing this already, ways of being and methods of communication that can sometimes preemptively prevent an escalation, or responsively, if an escalation occurs, you can responsively de-escalate and maybe prevent any kind of conflict. And when it's possible, to promote and support collaboration. So those are essentially our goals. Now, I'm going to stop for just a moment before we go forward. And I'm just going to ask, I did pose this question.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. What's up?
Okay. No, I just had an answer to your question. So when you're ready for those.
Oh, fantastic. Chad read my mind. Chad, the floor is yours. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, those three things in common, that's about regulation, right? So wellness is long-term ability to regulate over a long period of time.
Okay.
Self-care is about regulating moment to moment, and de-escalation is about helping that person, you know, re-regulate. I think it's important to know also that for de-escalation, we also have to recognize that we have to be able to self-regulate ourselves. So if we're not masterful in our own self-regulation, we shouldn't even be trying to help others de-escalate.
Fantastic. And you know, it's interesting, Chad, because when I posed the question, I was actually posing it from our perspective as the worker, like how wellness and self-care, and that's the point you actually concluded on, which was that our current state of, and I'm going to use your word here, Chad, our current state of regulation is going to have a direct impact on our ability or the quality of our ability to de-escalate a situation. Did I get that right, Chad? Okay. Chad, thank you so much for starting us off. Anybody else want to add to what Chad said about the relationship between our wellness, our ability to regulate, to use Chad's language there, and de-escalation? Anybody else? Antonio Ramirez writes in the chat, self-care keeps you calm. Calm people. I understand exactly what you mean. And hold on a minute. I want to read the rest of what Antonio said. Hold on. Okay. So calm people, escalated people, escalate people. Your wellness determines, and here's a really comprehensive list, your tone, your patience, your empathy, your presence, your clarity, your boundaries, your ability to listen, your ability to remain unshaken. And Holly adds, we cannot pour from an empty cup. Lindsay says, I say this all the time, exclamation point. Deborah adds, to be more granular, thank you, Deborah, if I cannot manage my own anxiety, I cannot help another with their anxiety. Yes. Physician, heal thyself, says Nicholas. And Paul W., another Paul W., because I'm a Paul W. too, the connection is that if I'm dysregulated, stressed, or burnt out, my nervous system is going to respond faster, and that makes de-escalation nearly impossible. Caitlin, I see your hand is raised. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to build on what everybody else is saying.
Please.
And also like talk about those nonverbal cues too. So if you're seeming anxious, they're going to pick up on that.
Yeah.
And then like not feel as safe or comfortable as they maybe could if you were regulated.
Yeah. Caitlin, thank you so much. And I don't know if you can see anybody's faces, but when you were saying that, Tracy was really nodding her head. So Tracy, you strongly agree with what Caitlin said?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Would you add anything to what she said?
It's not always easy to do, however.
Say a little more about that, please, because I think you're speaking truth there. So go right ahead.
Yes. So it's not always easy to do that because sometimes, different clients will come in. I work the front desk, so it's hard to know where that person is coming from on any given day. So, and it's hard to keep your tone cool without reacting. You know what I mean? Because a lot of the times most of the times, I think they take the cue from you.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, Tracy, you're not using this word, but I want to underline it. And I love the way you said that. They take their cue from you. So in essence, you're modeling how maybe the interaction can go.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. Thanks for adding that, Tracy. And again, the nonverbal communication, of course, as well. Thank you. Janet wrote in the chat, self-care and wellness, self-care and wellness self-care, and involve taking intentional actions to improve your physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual well-being. This can include physical activities like exercise and good sleep, emotional practice such as mindfulness and journaling, social actions like setting boundaries and connecting with loved ones, and mental activities like learning new skills. De-escalation works in conjunction with taking actions in very specific and soft tones to promote wellness and mirrored behavior to allow the client to engage mindfully and replicate the behaviors. Again, very similar, Tracy, very similar to what you were saying about the modeling piece. I mean, almost exactly what you were saying about that. I have anxiety, don't like public speaking. That's not a problem, Janet. I'm happy to read your text if I can see them. Noelle, your hand is raised. Go right ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to add to the nonverbal responses. They're much more telling with the client. And so, that you should really pay attention to. They may be saying something to calm themselves down. However, their body language is telling us something dangerous may be happening. So we should really be aware of that as well as our own nonverbal responses.
Yeah, and you know, Noelle, you and a number of people have already used this phrase, we need to be aware, or self-awareness.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'd like to propose something. And Noelle, you actually inspired this because you reiterated what people said. But what I'm going to ask everybody to do, and if I can't see you, you're on the honor system, I believe you. But what I'm going to ask everybody to do is take this moment, and sadly, we only have an hour, a little less than an hour now. But I'm going to ask everybody to take this moment, to take a nice deep breath and let it go. Let's just do it one more time and just let it go. And based on what Noelle said and what some other people said and wrote in the chat, I'm going to ask everybody, check in with yourself for a moment. How are you feeling? How are you feeling right now? Because if you were called on to de-escalate, this is very much to your point, I think, Noelle. If you were called on to de-escalate,
2025.
You would bring how you're feeling right at this particular moment to that de-escalation. So just keep that in mind, folks, this process of checking in with yourself. Deborah says, feel better after the deep breaths. Okay, thank you, Deborah. And Deborah, please just confirm with everybody that I neither spoke to you before this learning community, nor did I pay you to say that. We're gonna let Deborah confirm that before we go to Janet.
That's true.
Okay,
I've never met you before.
Excellent, Deborah. I will never forget you now. Thank you. Janet, the floor is yours.
Hi, that's why I think in regards to de-escalation, that's why I think it's imperative for everyone to get trained on crisis intervention, distress tolerance, mindfulness skills. It's imperative, especially in this community, what I've experienced as an educator, but I was also a client at one particular point in my life.
Okay.
I call them facial flaws. People's flaw, the flaws that they have in their faces. It's either you're going to either have an inviting face or you're going to have a face that people are going to run away from. I think that's extremely important because
Yes.
I run away from me as a person in particular.
Yeah.
I'll run away from someone that just looks upset or fearful or just have an intimidating personality or just very harsh. So we have to be very, it depends on our tone and how we approach things, and particularly, especially our face. Because, if I don't come across an individual that has an inviting face, that's the key to for me, that's the key. And, it'll introduce collaboration a little bit more. That's just my opinion.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for sharing your opinion. That's why we're here. And you're making an I statement. And I think to Janet's point, and Janet, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I think you're communicating, I think very eloquently, is that how a person's face kind of presents to you kind of gives you a clue as to whether you're going to feel safe or not with that person.
Absolutely.
Okay, I just want to make sure about that.
Absolutely.
And Jennifer says in the chat, what she said about facial flaws reminds me of a song. It's written all over your face. And Jennifer, if you feel you'd like to, you're more than welcome to unmute and sing a few bars of that to the learning community. I am not familiar with that song, but yes, it can be written all over your face. So keeping that in mind, folks. And I do want to underline what people were saying about nonverbal communication, because I want to make a link here. And that link is that when somebody is in an escalated state, they are paying, and to Janet's point, they are paying much more attention to what you do with your face and what you do with your body language. It's much more difficult because of where they may be in their brain at the time. It's much more difficult for them to actually hear and make sense of what you're saying. So if you can, try and put the emphasis on how are you presenting facially and physically in that person. And I'm also thinking your proximity. Are you too close to this person? Are you in their face? Do they feel threatened by your proximity? Or can you kind of retreat a little bit? And Janet, yes, possibly using your aura skills when conversation is actually possible. Because sometimes there needs to be a little bit of de-escalation before you can actually engage in a conversation. So keeping that in mind. Jeanette says, if I don't say it, my face will say it for me. Thank you, Jeanette. All right, I'm going to share my screen again. And Nicholas says, my face easily shows. That, I mean, it's great that you know that, because sometimes we have to be very intentional and in control of what our face is actually doing. So in addition to the link we've established between, and Chad started us off with this, in addition to the link we've made with your wellness, your current state of anxiety or lack thereof, or stress or lack thereof, the next big idea I'd like to introduce in regard to this conversation is I'm asking you to think about de-escalation in a slightly different way than it's often thought about. And that slightly different way is that it is actually, and you can see there's very big type here, that it's a process. It's not an event. Because what can happen is something can come up in a setting. I don't know if you could hear that, but you get a knock at the door, you get paged, you get called, you go in, you take care of something, and then you might go back to work. And what I'd like to suggest as part of this conversation is that de-escalation has a before, a during, and an after. And I'd like us to really be thinking about de-escalation as a process as opposed to just an event. And Janet also adds in the chat, exactly, a trauma response doesn't necessarily mean you'll develop a trauma disorder. Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's just say, for the purposes of our conversation, and there are 151 of us in this learning community conversation, so this landscape actually could be quite large, but I wanted to underline, we may have participants, consumers, patients that have a substance use and or a trauma history or both. We may have people who have mental as well as physical health status issues. We may have folks that we provide care to may have compounded life stressors or past service experiences they've had, or simply the moment before they walked into your office, something could have heightened their feelings. And I will also add, and I'm thinking of some of the remarks that we discussed as we thought about your self-care and your wellness, as people with lived experience or just people, we may share some of these landscape elements. And they're part of our experience. So it creates a certain insight for us, and it creates a certain susceptibility that we need to pay very, very close attention to. So this idea that heightened feelings can be very normal in the social service setting. And sometimes in settings, people want instant gratification. I'm here, I want to be seen. They have very low frustration tolerance if they have to wait or if the answer is no. And then a third one that I added here is what I call proximity sparks, meaning that in areas where people are together, sometimes those areas, reception, hallways, wherever people are interacting or physically closer to each other, you have the possibility of escalation in those areas as well. So a couple of basic ideas that I want to throw out, and then we're going to go to a scenario, and I'm going to ask, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we can get 2 volunteers, actually 3, because there's a second part to the scenario. So if we could get 3 volunteers who'd be willing to read out loud the scenario as it's written. So all the words are there. You just need to read out loud. And the only qualification is that you would speak loud enough so that everybody in the learning community can hear you. So I'm planting that seed for 3 volunteers, and we'll get to that. Keep in mind, a very basic and yet substantive, concrete approach is that when someone is escalated, we want to offer them validation, which is very different than offering them logic or education or information. We want to move away from that because sometimes that can actually escalate the situation. So we want to offer them validation. I hear your concerns. I hear your feelings. I see you, and I'm present here with you. So we want to try and communicate with our faces, with our physical, nonverbal communication, and our vocal tone, as people said, that we are listening, we care, and that we're present. And then if we can communicate that and that has any impact on the person, if they're able to de-escalate, and I have to acknowledge here, folks, not everybody can be de-escalated. There are situations where we do need to ask for outside resources because of safety issues. And that's part of the landscape as well. Because your safety should never be at risk. Your colleagues' safety should never be at risk, nor should the patient or the clients or the other patients or the clients. Then if the person is able to feel validated, sometimes you'll get a physical reaction where the person will go, they'll do some sort of physical and vocal sometimes thing that you know, okay, this person has begun to de-escalate. And then that's where you can collaboratively explore options and consequences. That's where if we can communicate that we care, we're interested, we're trying to figure out what works best for the person, we're off to a good start. And then if the person needs to make choices because they've come from a place of being escalated, it can be helpful to give the person a little bit of space and a little bit of time to consider, now that they've been able to be in a conversation, if they've been able to be in a conversation, give them a little bit of time to make choices about what they may do next. So I just shared this with you as kind of a basic approach. Now I'm going to stop sharing this for a minute. And we've arrived at the point of me asking, are there 3 people who would feel comfortable? There are 3 roles, and don't worry about the gender. You can be whatever gender identity you are, but you can read another role if you want. There's Barbara, the worker. There's Philip, the client. And then there is Sue, who's also a worker. So is there anyone who would be willing to volunteer to read one of those roles? And the benefit of volunteering first is you get to choose which role you want to read. Anybody willing? I can wait. Okay, so Deborah is going to volunteer. Deborah, which role would you like to read? You can be Barbara the worker, you can be Philip the client, or you can be Sue the worker.
I'll be Philip the client.
Fantastic. Okay, so we have the client. And Charles, are you volunteering as well?
I can volunteer.
Who is that?
Dwan.
Oh, where? Oh, Dwan, thank you so much. And Dwan, since you volunteered second, would you like to be Barbara the worker, or would you like to be Sue the worker?
I can do Sue.
Okay.
I'll be Sue.
You'll do Sue. Fantastic. And is there anyone willing to be Barbara the worker? And
I can do it.
Who is that?
Kiana.
Kiana, thank you so much. Now, I have to give 2 spoiler alerts here, okay? Spoiler alert number 1, there's cursing. So Philip is going to have to curse. FYI, Deborah.
Okay.
Okay, Dwan. Yeah, Janet's like, I can't wait. Dwan, Sue does not come in until part 2. So pay very close attention to part 1, okay?
Okay.
Fantastic.
Doable.
Dwan. Fantastic. So I'm going to bring the scenario up, and Deborah is Philip, the client, and Kiana is Barbara, the worker. I just want you to listen to part 1, and then we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to move on to part 2, which is very brief. Okay? All set? Okay, good. And again, Deborah, Kiana, Dwan, just make sure that when you're reading, that everybody in the learning community can hear you, okay?
Yeah.
Great. So, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that I have enlarged the text large enough for everybody to read. Does that look readable?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay for everybody? All right. So, and I will do my best to scroll down and not screw it up so you can see your next. Sometimes I screw it up, but I'll do my best not to. Okay, so Philip has the first line whenever you're ready.
I'm here to see John for my appointment.
What's your name?
My name is Philip Thomas. Philip with 1 L. You all always spell it wrong.
Hi, Philip. I see that your appointment is not until next week.
That's not right. I have an appointment with John today. Check the spelling of my name in your computer. My appointment is today.
No, Philip. I see here it's for next week. You're going to have to come back next week for your appointment with John.
I ain't coming back next week. You think I got time to keep coming back here? My appointment is today. Check how you spelled my name again.
Sir, no matter how your name is spelled, John is not even here today to see you. I'm sorry, you'll have to come back next week for your appointment.
Bitch, this is some bullshit. Y'all got to do something for me right here, right now. I got an appointment, and now you telling me John ain't even here. Well, you better call him, because I'm going to be right here until John sees me today.
Hold. Excellent. All right. Barbara, Kiana. Round of applause. All right. And Janet writes, oh my God, sounds like the old me before CBT, DBT, ER. All right. And other people are giving you applause too. Excellent. Fantastic. So thoughts, reactions to the conversation between the client and the worker. Any thoughts, any reactions, anything that you noticed? And Janet, we'll start with Janet S. We'll start with you since you were very much looking forward. If that's okay, you can pass if you don't want to. But any thoughts, any reactions to the interaction between them?
Can I ponder on it for a minute and get back to you?
Of course, of course,
All right.
of course, of course. Virginia types in the chat, Barbara raised her voice. Yes, she did. Well noted, Virginia. Christy writes in the chat, the front desk person was dismissive and didn't validate his feelings. Debbie adds, stern tone. Janet, you're back. Go right ahead.
Okay, so when you're not emotionally regulated, no matter if you're yelling and you're screaming and you're cursing, even if what you're arguing about is correct, you're always gonna look like you're crazy. Take it from experience. When I didn't have the coping skills or the education, or I didn't know what gaslighting meant, or et cetera, before I educated myself, I used to have outbursts. And a large majority of that is because I was like a chicken without my head cut off. I didn't know how to express my emotions. I didn't know what I was feeling. I didn't know how to process anything. Until I educated myself, I was introduced to CBT, DBT. Then I learned crisis intervention, distress tolerance, mindfulness, and it changed the whole dynamic.
Okay.
Changed the whole dynamic. I learned about the polyvagal theory, and I beat my anxiety and depression. I no longer have outbursts. I now became an educator. So I thought there was no hope for me for years. And it's doable. And seeing those type of scenarios just make me self-reflect, because it just reminds me that we all have outbursts sometime or another in our lives. It's just about, as the other gentleman was saying, it's about regulating our emotions, processing our emotions mindfully, and expressing ourselves mindfully, asking those questions like, just being mindful. She wasn't being mindful, and she was just being vulgar, and she's not going to get a proper response.
Okay.
Or the response that she's looking for if you're being negative, because you're going to be introduced with negative responses in conjunction.
Got it. Got it. And, Janet, thank you so much for saying that, because I feel like you're bringing so much insight into maybe where the Philip character is really coming from. Maybe that person does not have the ability to cope with, I thought this is what was going to be happening, and now it's not happening, and that's freaking me out. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. So there's a lot of things coming in the chat, which is fantastic. Sydney writes, I work at a front desk for a mental health office. I definitely have dealt with a similar situation. De-escalation skills are extremely important in this situation. You need to pay attention and be respectful of how the client is reacting and help meet their needs while hearing them out. Tony writes, do not offer to see another worker. Okay. And Jennifer adds, not addressing Philip's misspelling of his name caused Philip to snap. Okay. All right. Which provides an excellent transition into Dwan in the character of Sue. Kiana, as the character of Barbara, is not going to say too much at this particular point, but we'll be paying attention, of course. And Deborah, in the role of Philip, will continue. Okay, this is very brief, but it relates to something that somebody just put in the chat. So you've provided a great transition. And the other thing I'm sort of getting from the chat, and there's a lot happening in the chat, which is fantastic, but the thing I'm getting is people think this is a fairly realistic exchange, that this could actually, people could speak to each other this way. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah? Nicholas says no, or maybe
Every
Nicholas
day if
taught
you live
something.
in New York. If
What was
every
that?
day, every day if you live in New York.
Okay. Okay. All right. So it could have a lot to do with the region too. Okay. All right. Fantastic. All right. Yeah. Sometimes OCD comes into play as well as being fantastic. All right. So folks, I'm going to share the scenario again. Dwan gets, as Sue gets the first line, and Deborah, you're on board and ready to continue. Spoiler alert. You do not have to curse again, Deborah.
Sounds good.
All right, here we go.
Philip, Philip with one L, Mr. Philip Thomas.
That's right. 1L. You got it. And who the hell are you?
Mr. Thomas, I'm Sue. You're here and you are ready to see John?
You got that right. And I'm not going anywhere until I see someone.
Well, you're gonna see me. You're gonna see someone today. I'm really sorry for our scheduling mistake. If you tell me to, I can check to see if one of our other counselors is available.
I'm here. Sure. Go ahead and check. Before they see me, would you tell them it's Philip with 1L?
Yes, Mr. Thomas, Philip with one L. They'll know before they see you.
Excellent. End of scene. Wow. I wish that was recorded. Fantastic. So thoughts, reactions, and I'm going to phrase it particularly this way. And I'm phrasing it this way. Well, first, before I say another word, we must applaud Dwan and Deborah. Excellent. And we must applaud Kiana for not jumping in and trying to take over the situation. Excellent. Very well, Kiana. All right. So any thoughts, and I'm purposely putting it this way. Any thoughts about Dwan's, Sue's intervention? Because she intervened. So what was her strategy? What did you know? Janet, go right ahead. What did you notice?
I love the fact that she took accountability. The first thing a client wants to hear is, I'm sorry. That's the first thing that should have came out of her mouth. I apologize. How can we make this right? Found a solution, solution-based, person-centered care. And it was, once someone says, I'm sorry, the biggest thing for a client and what upsets clients the most is when you feel gaslit, or they're giving you no credibility.
Yep.
They don't hate that.
Yep. And it's funny you use the word credibility because Dwan very insightfully, the character of Sue, very insightfully says, I'm going to give credibility to his name.
Exactly.
Because clearly that's important to him. Fantastic. And
I think Sue killed him with kindness.
yes. And Dwan, thanks for saying that because your tone really reflected that. Your tone of voice was kind, it was warm, it was respectful. And Melissa adds she came in with his concerns. She was person-centered. Amanda says validation of the client's needs, explored the available options with him. And Sandra notes the spelling was important to Philip, so she met him there and made it important too. And I really appreciate, Sandra, that you noted that, because what may seem irrelevant to us could be extremely important to that person. And we are much better off to meet them where something is important to them than to discount what's important to them. Victor writes, Sue enabled client agency, moving forward with the solution only if he was okay with it. Victor, very well observed. Not everybody catches that. Because Sue said to him, if you tell me to, I will do this. And the other thing to keep in mind, folks, how that relates to de-escalation is the more you can let the person, and I'm going to use Victor's word here, the more you can let the person exercise their autonomy or their agency, the more likely they are to de-escalate, because they don't feel unsafe and out of control. If he gets to decide, then he has control. So just keeping that in mind. And I know it's a very simplistic thing, but I think it underlines a very important point, that tune into what the person is telling you is important to them. Key in on that. Reflect that back. Let them know you get what's important to them. Yeah, Caitlin, please, the floor is yours. Go right ahead.
I wanted to add, so you said that it's simplistic, but I think it definitely needed to be said, because especially we've talked in other learning communities about being fixers in human services.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
it's very tempting to want to take over the conversation and lead it, when it's definitely more important that they are leading the conversation.
Yeah. Thank you, Caitlin. Sandra, the floor is yours. Go right ahead.
Just wanted to add that on top of not having the client not feel powerless, it also doesn't change cognitively as well, because a person cannot be in the thinking part of the brain, emotional part of the brain at the same time. So when you
Yes.
give them an option, that puts them back into that thinking part, which, you know, when we flip our lid, you know, the hand model,
Yeah.
it's what goes down and gets them basically to de-escalate. So you're basically following in order to guide again.
Thank you. Thank you for elaborating on that, Sandra. And the thing I will also underline is that's why I said earlier, sometimes we have to give the person a little time to consider. And I have to say, Deborah, you played that moment very well, because you left this like little bit of space and you were like, yeah, okay, you can do that. So thank you for demonstrating so clearly that little bit
Yeah.
of
And can I just add, even like being in an acting mode for it, when somebody kind of presents you back with everything you're kind of asking for that's within their power to give you, which
Yes.
was in this case the name, spelling, and seeing somebody, even if it wasn't the counselor that I was, you know, normally to see.
Yes.
It's really hard to keep that level of intensity and anger up. So
Yes.
whether that's that thinking mind that somebody just mentioned,
Yeah.
just from trying to be in role, it just really felt like, oh, I just can't argue against this anymore. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much, Deborah. So folks, we are almost at the end of our time together. So I'm just going to show you a couple of more things, and then I will say thank you so much. And I hope that you will come back for future learning community conversations on this topic and others. But I would be really, really remiss if we didn't take just one more moment to thank the folks who so well and well done read the scenario for us. So thank you. Thanks to the three of you very much. Thank you so much for doing that. So I'm gonna, and that was Deborah, Kiana, and Dwan who greatly volunteered for us to do that. So I'm gonna share my screen right now. And just remind you of these basic principles. We're gonna send you this slide deck at the end, but just remembering that these are things that can help with effective intervention. The idea of remaining calm, isolating the individual when it's safe and appropriate to do that, because sometimes they need to not have an audience. Being, again, very aware of your body language. If you are going to talk, keep it simple. And somebody mentioned earlier using ORs, the idea of using reflective listening to communicate to that person, I'm hearing you. And then sometimes just shutting up. And I'll say that in perhaps a more clinical way, using silence effectively, because maybe the person needs to just get it off their chest, or maybe they need to say it and then be quiet for a moment. And then paying very close attention to our tone of voice, how fast we're speaking, all those paraverbal elements that have an impact. And again, we saw Dwan use a very effective, caring, calm, and warm tone of voice.
What's a paraverbal?
Paraverbals are is that Dwan, by the way?
Yes, it is.
I recognize your voice because I can't see you at this moment, but I think you can see me. Paraverbals are the speed at which we're speaking, the tone of our voice, our inflection, all those elements that color the words that we're actually offering to the person.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Now, I'll conclude with this brief model that I want to share with you, which is called the ABC model. At any point when you're observing somebody's behavior, you can pay specific attention to their emotional state, their behavioral functioning, what they're doing physically, and their cognitive state, how they're speaking, how quickly they're speaking, what their thinking is like. And I just shared this simple model with you because you can get into the habit of like observing somebody and saying, okay, well, this is what I'm observing in terms of their feelings that they're demonstrating. This is what their behavioral functioning is telling me, and this is what their cognitive state is telling me. And the benefit of that, folks, is that you will have a beginning picture of what you're walking into. So it can be a very useful tool before you say or do anything. Final thoughts, remember, safety for everybody. Your particular state of well-being does impact the team. De-escalation is a team process. And if we're going to effectively de-escalate, it begins long before an event ever occurred. We're thinking about it, we're talking about it, we're practicing, and then we're reflecting on what we've de-escalated, we're learning from that, and we're refining what we do, and making sure that no one de-escalates alone. Remember, how you experience stress or anxiety is going to be unique to you, to your body. Know about your reactions. If you can, debrief with your team or other staff. If it's possible, take time away if you can. Not always possible, but if you can. And if you have supervision or trusted colleagues, talk with them about your experience of de-escalation. And if you have employee assistance programs or other sponsored benefits like paid vacation time or paid sick time, use those benefits. Only you can do that. Having said that, folks, I'll leave you with this quote and then the last slide. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that's particularly important in the process of de-escalation, because they will be left with the impression of what it was like to be with you. They may not remember a word you said, but they will remember how they felt. Having said that, folks, please scan the QR code or click on the live link and complete the brief evaluation. I can't thank you enough for what you brought to the table. And as I said before, I hope that we'll see each other in a future learning community conversation. And please have a very safe and wonderful weekend. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for being here.